Thank you very much. And right now, someone for whom AI is a tool that changes lives and businesses. This is one of the leading world women AI researchers. According to Forbes, she consults the largest global corporations that in many ways shape the technology market of tomorrow. The solutions that the development of which she led helped to detect 40 potential drugs for 11 types of cancer. She's the voice that is heard at the board, and when we talk about AI, and when we talk about saving lives of millions of people, and today we have a unique opportunity to hear this great expert, the CEO and co-founder of XLabs and Ribo AI, Radhika Dirks. The name of the presentation: What's Next in AI? Building Value Through Emerging Intelligence. Radhika has connected to us online. A round of applause.
Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I wish I was right there in Moscow with all of you, but I'm glad to be joining virtually. And what a moment it is as we close out today, the second day in business at AI Journey, to be talking about what's next. It's such an interesting moment. In fact, these are the headlines from the news less than 24 hours ago. We're at this very paradoxical moment, isn't it? Market uncertainties are at an all-time high. It's okay, don't pull out your phones just yet. We can last 30 minutes without checking ticker symbols. And the reason for this is because we have built a large industry just in a span of 3 years. If you look at what's at stake, this is just the top AI companies in S&P 500. And the market cap of these companies, mind you, it's not even global, right? We're looking at $23 trillion in AI companies. So no wonder the markets are having a panic attack anytime we have any kind of movement. And we have built this emerging industry with so many cross deals and partnerships because it's happened in the last few years. Just again, in a span of almost 3 years since GPT was released by OpenAI. And there's good reason for this paradoxical moment because there's a plethora of tools out there. Again, this is just a snapshot by Sequoia. And we're not even touching on the majority of tools out there, but anyone who has seen or played with generative AI immediately gets a feel for how useful they can be. So we're sitting at this let's tying back to the uncertainty, the markets are sitting on this massive capital and looking at where is the value. We have deployed this, anybody using it can sense the value, but there is this massive discrepancy that also trickles down to the technology. This is Sam Altman himself, and a few days ago, he's talking about how now we're at a phase where ChatGPT can remove M dashes, the long dashes it always likes to use. And compare that to his quote from January, where it's like, oh, we know we're on the path to AGI. So this paradoxical, is it a hype? Is it not a hype? How can this be a hype? I can see the value. It's all interwoven. And that's what we're going to discuss today. Yes, there are massive companies out there, many of them my clients, deploying billions of dollars. JP Morgan has more than $2 billion in. And this uncertainty, this paradoxical moment has also obviously translated on the business side. Because while billions have been invested, productivity has actually gone up, the stark reality is that 95% of organizations, 95, have seen zero returns on generative AI. So the question obviously becomes, we have invested more than $30 to $40 billion in enterprise AI. Well, what are these 5% of organizations doing right? Because this is the key point of this keynote. Just that in order for us to see the returns on AI, in order for this industry to keep growing and bring the benefits and power of the technology to full circle returns, we need to be looking at beyond LLMs. No matter which industry you're sitting in today, whether it's technology, healthcare, banking, manufacturing, energy, the way to get the returns on your AI investment is by integrating what I call emerging intelligence. And that's the key point today. I'd like to close out today by making the observation that it's not going to be a particular app or how we implement it or how we integrate a particular tool, but sort of this larger looking beyond what's available today and getting ready to implement what's already in the pipelines. So we won't be discussing any specific things. What I instead want to do is to share a landscape view. We're going to zoom back a little and talk about 3 emerging waves. Each of these waves has a technological reason for it that we will cover. Each of these waves is solving a very real business value that is missing in generative AI today. And each of these waves is also going to tie back and bring full circle to the returns. And we'll wrap it all up as we end with like next steps and how you can implement this and what you need to bear in mind as you implement this. So I hope you're ready as we get started here with the very first wave. We just heard about this very interesting talk. The first wave is the embodied intelligence. So this is where we're taking the LLMs and going beyond. Right? It's not just putting the capability of LLMs into humanoid robots. It's much, much larger than that. And this is just a snapshot of some of the US companies. Most of my talk is going to be geared and calling on examples from mostly US companies, a few Chinese companies, but bear in mind that everything I'm discussing is applicable globally. And these robots, as you just heard, are not just useful for helping things around the house, but also in machines, in operations, manufacturing, playing sports. But they also come in many shapes and sizes, like little pets, little humanoid pet robots or sibling robots for kids, useful for education. I mean, a wide variety. The reality, though, is that many of these robots are humanoids, are still being operated by teleoperators. And there's a reason for this. Because what is the underlying tech capability that we don't quite have yet? This is where the underlying tech that's being developed beyond LLMs is world models. You might have heard this language being thrown around quite a bit. You might have also heard of the term spatial models. And the biggest difference between world models versus large language models is that these models learn on visual information, not just being able to predict on large quantities of text, which is the realm of LLMs. Now, this is going to be a huge step forward when we start integrating them more and more into our business, because these humanoids, these machines are learning on real world. This is the physical world. It's not the abstract world of predicting and creating content, which has been useful and productive, but they lack the real world experience. It's more than just a physics. So when I see these things going around Miami, and I know that there's a teleoperator behind them, these are like food operator robots that you can now see around the world. The point to remember here is that not only are they adding immediate value right now, but they're actually collecting the data that's required for the autonomous operation. So if you're thinking about it from an investment perspective, the companies that have the data records from autonomous operations, from say driving, and if they're extending it to humanoids, they have a natural leg up because there's all these years and years and man-years of data that they can pull on to then apply. Again, it's more than learning physics. It's learning how humans walk around. It's learning how we navigate traffic. It's learning how the real world bumps and pebbles and rocks come into your workflow, and what you do when you come across a human child or a dog. this way of learning, there are many ways the actual technology is being understood and learned. But this is one of the older videos from NVIDIA actually, but it really explains one way we're teaching these robots to learn. Let's watch.
In physically based simulation and transfer zero shock to the real world. The GROUP model will enable a robot to learn from a handful of human demonstrations so it can help with everyday tasks and emulate human movement just by observing us.
Just by observing us. And that's part of the reason why many of these humanoids that are being beta tested, or I guess I should say alpha tested in homes today, have a teleoperator behind them. They are learning and you're training the robots. And that is a new kind of partnership, a new kind of deal, if you will, that we're making with the world of embodied intelligence. The biggest ROI implication, what is this going to bring to businesses? What is this going to bring to the AI industry? Is in addition to extending the use cases by bringing them, full circle into the homes, into the real world, being able to operate and do a lot of these tasks autonomously, is that more importantly, they bring the relevance and the context. Because if you look at where the value is really missing today in these enterprise implementations, it's not in the use cases. People are actually using them, but they break when the real world context is not there. Anytime you actually apply it to an actual real world implementation. The second wave is that of embedded intelligence. So we're moving from embodied intelligence to the second one, which is embedded. And in this, we started seeing this wave, pretty much a few months after LLMs were released. Any kind of device with edge functioning, with edge AI right on them. These are Meta's Ray-Ban glasses. So with the tip of your finger, you have access to any of the LLM type tools, play music, or ask it some questions like, what temperature do you need to cook the chicken at? Or you could ask it to play back the conversation you just had with your wife to show her who's right. All are possibilities. But those are not the only ones. We have a plethora of single function devices. And, at one point I remember when smartphones came around and, nobody carried their watches and stuff anymore. I used to think, wow, that's just a single function device. Like, who wants it? Turns out we do now. Because these single function devices, from language translator pens to earbuds that detect and prevent snoring, so-called marriage saver, or a smart mirror that tells you everything you need to know. These are just samples. I mean, if you can put AI in anything, we are putting AI in anything. My vacuum talks back to me now. And the reason for this, right, the underlying technological capability that we're going to pull in full circle is that it's learning workflows. It's learning how to, in real time, how the human operates, how the devices operate. It's learning your workflows, and this way it can bring back what's really needed in LLMs and Gen AI today, adaptability. We talked about context, we talked about real world, but getting the LLMs to adapt real time is one of the most crucial missing capabilities in technology today that's causing this big gap on returns in investment. This embedded AI doesn't just come in devices. You can embed it to current software tools. Let's watch.
Hey Daniel, what's up? Mi amigo Ezequiel nos ha invitado a ver los cuartos de final esta noche.
يا ريت اعرف اجي. لو ما قدرتش عايشوا انتوا بقى مع الماتش.
别忘了带零食。再见。
So right here we have Messi, and this is the real Messi. This is not an AI avatar of Messi. This is the real Messi. But with face processing tools, language processing tools, direct face recognition, and customization, he's now able to talk in any language to your customers, understanding how they interact and increasing the amount and the depth of interactions you can now have with your clients, with your customers, with your different audience. This too is embedded AI. So it's kind of like a double level, it's abstract as well as in devices. And that's the second wave that we're seeing. And the direct ROI, as I mentioned before, is now you're going to have adaptable models, moving away from static models that are only updated once in a while and take billions to almost $1 trillion now. We're looking at adaptable models that is learning from everyday mini tasks or mini functions. Which brings me to the third wave, executive intelligence. This is the big one. This is what differentiates the leaders and the decision-making capabilities of humans on everyday tasks, where the minute it goes from something simple to something complex. This is when you're drawing on your years of expertise. This is almost human intuition. This can't just be boiled down to a step of rational if, when, this. But even if it could be boiled down to if, when, this, we don't currently have the tools for that. So this is the big one, and a great example of this is how the UAE has appointed AI as an advisory member of the cabinet. It was the world's first move. This AI will deliver strategic consultations, generate reports, and conduct predictive modeling. So this was the vision. Even 2 years ago, I remember talking about this, where we were talking about having an AI as a board member, AI as your advisor. And well, this is possible today, but it's taking a whole lot of build and workflows and stitching together. Remember, 2025 was supposed to be the year of AI agents. This is where I was supposed to have been able to, with one click of a button, have my agent plan a whole trip, bring my friends together, book our tickets, plan itineraries, all with like one click. Well, this is Andrew Kaparthi, one of the prominent researchers in the field, the guy who coded the term vibe coding. And we are all realizing that it's going to take a whole lot more to bring agents, real world agents, to the majority of people in the world. And it's not as quick as we thought. Why? Because they lack intelligence. They can't use computers. They lack multimodality. They lack continual learning, and more importantly, they forget what you tell them. And this forgetting what you tell them is something we'll come back to over and over again. And perhaps fixing these gaps won't take a decade. I'm way more optimistic than Andrew when it comes to this. But it's also important to remember that this is the reason agents haven't taken over quite yet. And the missing piece, if you look at where in businesses a lot of our implementations are failing, it's not in people not using them. They're using them. They like the LLMs, but they are using them for simple tasks. At the minute we move to a complex task, anything that requires multiple people takes weeks, not minutes. Anything that requires cooperation, multiple teams, this is where the agents are failing, the stitching together. AI today is failing along the seams. And along the seams is where you need to be focusing on in terms of workflows, in terms of what to build, and in terms of extracting the value. And this is where the technology is headed. Because you see, the reality is LLMs today live outside of time. What do I mean by that? You can, of course, ask your ChatGPT or any of the LLMs you like to use the time. It'll tell you the time by looking at the system clock, etc. But when you go into the world of LLMs, it has no memory. For example, you can ask it to generate, write a report, a journal report on everything we did today. But you cannot ask it without external workflows and having wrappers, etc., etc. You cannot ask an LLM today to write that journal report every night for you automatically. And that's because they don't have this concept of time. And as a physicist, I can tell you, when you don't have a concept of time, you're missing the dynamics. You cannot learn. You cannot adapt. And without memory, how can you make real-time decisions? So this is going to be is already one of the biggest moves in the world of models: temporal modeling, causal modeling, or neurosymbolic. These are all capabilities. Neurosymbolic refers to when you integrate the neural nets that the current technology is based on with symbolic logic, the if, then, else kind of chain of reasoning, predictive decision making, weighted expectations, scenario mapping. And this is where we're going to start seeing the executive intelligence, because this will achieve one of the biggest gaps today, which is moving to complex tasks. This report that came out of MIT this year, just a couple of months ago, talking about how 95% of organizations see zero returns, also dives into why. Because on the surface, it might look like the biggest operational failure of generative AI, but not quite. Because 90% of people, while they prefer humans for complex tasks, for all the reasons we just talked about, they prefer AIs for simple tasks. So the $50,000 or more enterprise applications are failing to the $20 consumer apps. And customers, employees everywhere are using the AIs that they're used to, but the barrier for enterprise applications are higher because they've seen on the consumer side how easy it is, how quickly they can increase their productivity. But somehow this productivity value is not translating to business returns. And that's the gap we need to fill for the markets to calm down and start seeing how we can extract the actual value that is inherent in the technology. The second reason is that we're losing a lot of time and implementation results between when we investigate these apps to what's actually being implemented. And once again here, the consumer apps are winning in the enterprise use cases. So people are using it behind the scenes. So while we investigate, so if you take something like ChatGPT or publicly Claude or any of the publicly available any of the publicly available LLMs, they reach actual implementation 5% of the times 40% of the times compared to 5% for generative AI enterprise apps. Hidden here is this story, because building AI value hinges on going beyond LLMs and integrating them with these emerging technologies across embodied, embedded, and executive intelligence. It's only when we start bringing all pieces together, every little bit helps, but when we start bringing those things together, we're going to see this industry really solidify and continue to grow. The biggest boon and boom that generative AI gave us was that it achieved one of the holy grails of the field of AI, which is what if we can command computers with the power of human language? But linguistics, is just one aspect of human programming. It's huge. In a way, it's the operating system of humans, but we need the real life context. We need the world models. We need the spatial models. We need the symbolic reasoning. We're not just language. And if we're trying to get anywhere near to human level intelligence, we need to look beyond LLMs. And whether we can just scale with more data, especially just textual data, that remains an open debate. I find myself on the other side of. But it will certainly not hurt us to start investigating newer models and integrating more of these newer models. Because this is a very useful technology. Again, pulling on just ChatGPT because the numbers are so easy to assess and access. So it has more than 1.8 billion visits a year. We're coming up on the 3rd year anniversary. It's deployed in over 161 countries. It covers 96 languages. And remember when they started out and they added 1 million users in 5 days? Where this is a quote from a tweet from Sam Altman just in March, where they added 1 million users in 1 hour. So AI in many ways is really not a hype, because anyone can see how quickly people are adapting the technology and how much we're using it. And we've moved past the days, and one of the other reasons organizational implementations fail is when they take months and months. Southwest has a fantastic example where they rehauled their entire crew management system, their legacy management system, in 5 weeks. And that was one of the biggest success cases for them. We're using this live, and this is pulling from my client work. We're designing hospitals of the future with one of the top architectural firms here. And even before generative AI, this was Ribo, where we pulled up 40 new potential cures for 11 types of cancer. And this is one of the biggest points I can make here, which is that AI is larger than generative AI. And the more of the AI tools like predictive modeling, all the statistical information, Bayesian analysis, all these tools that we can pull in and integrate it into LLMs, that's when we're going to really start seeing the real operational value in AI. With the three waves, what becomes really important is that how we start navigating the space. And I think any talk on AI should address two really key things. One is ethics and security. And I know we're going to dive a lot and we have separate sessions on either of them, but I want to quickly touch on these before we get to next steps and how you can integrate them directly. The first is ethics. Every powerful technology carries with it the potential for catastrophe. We've seen this over and over again, from nuclear engineering to space engineering to mammals being cloned. And every time we've had to navigate this with care, AI is absolutely no different. This movement in generative AI, what the industry is telling us right now, is that we've moved past the attention economy that AI was built on, the social media world. This is a race to intimacy. And over again, if there's one thing we have learned from the past industrial booms, all the way from the automotive industry or even the .com, is that the businesses that succeed, there's always like a blossoming of companies, but the ones that really succeed and thrive are the ones that really hone in on the ethics and zoom in on what really matters and how you can improve human lives. And that always seems to help. Whether it's Ford or Google, they are still around. AI is changing the nature of fraud and the nature of human trust. If, as a leader, as a decision maker, as a user, you can tap into this and be on the right side of this, this is where true wins. This is where industry building iconic companies are going to come from. AI ethics comes from each and every one of us. And so does AI security. This itself is a whole new burgeoning field at this point. Just a few months after ChatGPT was released, we had a Hong Kong worker in finance who thought he was paying out $25 million to his CFO on a live video call. And this is without any of the emerging intelligences. These capabilities already exist. AI worms are out there. And this is Anthropic just a few days ago reporting on hackers that hacked into Claude to get access to multiple company documents and multiple sensitive information. And of course, one of the biggest issues that is typically underneath the scenes is that generative AI, all of the AI tools in ways, they plagiarize because they're built on existing content. And the same thing will continue to happen with each of the emerging technologies because we're learning on existing data. So this is me asking Bing back in the day to write a conversation in the style of Quentin Tarantino. And it starts talking about two hitmen, Jules and Winston, sitting in a coffee shop. And I love Quentin Tarantino. So as I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh my God, I would watch this movie. It throws in a Bible verse and I'm like, oh my goodness, I will definitely watch this movie. Well, it turns out it's Pulp Fiction. And this is a really important point as we step forward because all of these devices, all of the models are learning on your data, which means it's a twofold issue. One, you could unintentionally infringe on somebody else's copyright. But then at the same time, you have to be very sensitive about your information and have very direct clarity on what you're sharing because you're training these models. So that's part of the reason enterprise implementations have stalled because they're walking this really fine line. But the real secret is that as we look at the emerging intelligences that are coming out, from embodied intelligence to embedded and executive. We're learning that whether it's world models or learning workflows or really learning true agency, in order to integrate them into real value, we have to look on the shadow side. The shadows are there to teach us something, to help us evolve. So we can't quite ignore them. It's by leaning in that you can awaken and build what you want to build. Shadow AI is an actual term, and it refers to the fact that most people are using AI. 90% of employees are using AI in organizations, whether it's been implemented at the enterprise level or not, whether there's a policy there or not, or even if they have an enterprise implementation, how they prefer using the $20 commonly available tools, because the barrier to them is less, their tolerance to use them is less. Like it's just way more convenient. So this is what the shadow is telling us. Make it easy for them. In a way, this is the largest enterprise application of any technology or adoption of any technology that has been, but it's failing when we try to do it officially. And that's where the returns are missing. So this is a 5% playbook as we wrap up here. In order to get your ROI on AI today, the first thing I would recommend is revisit your AI strategy. It's a fantastic time for it. And what you want to do is you want to build for friction, not for flash. So most organizations invest their AI dollars into sales and marketing because it's easy to generate the content, but it's also easy to have direct measures like KPIs. You can see how many customers you're targeting, what is the return, what is the click. But the real value is in the back office. And that was the biggest finding from looking at hundreds of organizational implementations this year. The biggest value is in the back office. So you want to build for systems with learning loops. You want humble AI, one that can learn and admit uncertainty. And you want to lean deeply into workflows. Companies that start recording data on their workflows are going to already have a leg up over the next year. And you want to buy, not build. You want to work with external partners and bring in external advisors who have purview over the entire industry, because AI, in the fundamental models, the foundational models, are not built for any one particular industry. And the same is going to be true for the world models or the temporal or the neurosymbolic models. These are general purpose machines. So you want advisors, because learning how it's implemented in one industry will give you a whole lot of insight into how it's going to be, should be implemented for yours. And it's time to start building differently. We don't want to just look at technology first. This question, like what can AI do for you, is one of the worst questions you can ask, because it can do many, many things for you. And you don't want to also lean into the vertical. What are the problems you can solve today? You want to look at the vision. You want to look at what is it that you can build that seems impossible. And that is the recurring theme of the massive billion-dollar and trillion-dollar companies that are leading today and will continue to lead. Build for vision. So the main message I would like to end with is that every industry, every aspect of society is being transformed. AI just happens to be the face of that force. And this transformation is going to happen regardless. And it's through emerging intelligences that we can come back full circle to get the returns on investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Radhika, Dirks, ваши аплодисменты.
Round of applause for Radhika, Dirks, friends.